Imagine someone tells you to picture an apple, a red apple, maybe a green one. Most people can do this. They can close their eyes or just look straight ahead, and a mental image of an apple pops into their head. They can see its shape, its color, maybe even its little stem. Some people can spin it around or imagine taking a bite. This is what we call visualizing or seeing in your mind's eye. But what if you can't? What if someone asks you to picture an apple, and you know what an apple is? You know what red is, but no image shows up in your head. Not a faint one, not a blurry one, just nothing. You understand the concept, you remember what an apple looks like from real life. But you can't see it in your imagination. This experience has a name. It's called aphantasia. Aphantasia means you don't have a mind's eye, or more accurately, your mind's eye doesn't produce images. You just don't get those mental pictures. For a long time, people didn't know this was even a thing. Many thought everyone was just speaking metaphorically when they talked about seeing things in their head. It was only relatively recently that we even had a word for it. Think about it. For centuries, people have talked about imagination and visualization. Writers describe characters seeing things in their minds. Philosophers discuss mental images. And for centuries, people with aphantasia probably just nodded along. They probably thought, oh, they just mean they're thinking about it really hard. They had no idea that other people were actually having a visual experience inside their heads. The discovery of aphantasia as a distinct neurological variation is a pretty modern story. It really gained traction in 2015. A professor named Adam Zeman at the University of Exeter started looking into it more deeply. He had actually encountered a patient back in 2005. This patient, a man, had undergone heart surgery. After the surgery, he noticed he had lost his ability to visualize. Before the surgery, he could picture things. After, he couldn't. It was a sudden change for him. This was very unusual. Professor Zeman called this condition acquired aphantasia because it was something that developed after an event. But as he looked more, he found something even more interesting. Many people had never been able to visualize, not even as children. They had congenital aphantasia. It was just how their brains had always worked. They didn't lose something, they just never had it in the first place. For these people, realizing they had aphantasia could be a huge moment. Imagine living your whole life thinking everyone experienced the world the same way you did. Then you hear someone talking about picturing their breakfast or mentally redesigning their living room. And you think, wait, they actually see that? Like an actual picture? That's a common story from people who discover they have aphantasia. It can be a real shock. Some feel a bit sad, like they missed out on something. Others feel a sense of relief, finally understanding why certain things felt different for them. So, what does visualization actually mean for most people? It's not like seeing with your eyes open. It's more of an internal perception. It's often described as a vividness. Some people see things almost as clearly as if they were looking at them. They can rotate objects, change colors, place them in different settings, all within their mind. They can walk through their childhood home, see every detail, every piece of furniture, maybe even the dust motes in the sunlight. This is often called hyperphantasia when it's particularly strong. For others, the images are less clear, more fleeting, or a bit blurry. It's a spectrum, you see. On one end, you have hyperphantasia, where mental images are incredibly vivid and detailed. In the middle, most people have some degree of visualization, maybe not perfect, but definitely present. And then, on the other end, you have aphantasia, where there's no visual experience at all. It's a blank screen. And it's not just about seeing. Our minds can imagine sounds, too. Maybe the sound of a loved one's voice, or a favorite song. Some people can imagine smells, like coffee brewing or a freshly baked cake. Others can imagine tastes or physical sensations. Aphantasia primarily refers to the visual inability. But many people who can't visualize also find they can't imagine sounds, onoralia, smells, anosphantasia, or other senses either. It can be a full sensory imagination blackout. So how does this play out in everyday life? How do you live without a mind's eye? Memory is a big one. For many people, recalling a memory means bringing up a mental picture. They can see a moment from their past. They can replay it like a short movie clip. For someone with aphantasia, this is impossible. They know what happened. They remember facts, feelings, the sequence of events. But they don't see it. For example, if you ask an aphantatic person to remember their last birthday party, they can tell you all about it. They can tell you who was there, what gifts they got, what they ate, how they felt. They can access all that information, but they won't have a mental photograph or video of the event playing in their mind. It's more like accessing a database of facts and concepts. They might remember the idea of a red cake, but not visualize the cake itself. This can sometimes lead to what's called severely deficient autobiographical memory, or STAM. Not everyone with aphantasia has STAM, and not everyone with STAM has aphantasia. But there's a strong overlap. STAM means you have trouble reliving past events. You remember the facts, but you don't get that feeling of re-experiencing the past. You just know it happened. This makes sense if you can't visualize. Reliving often involves those mental images. Thinking about faces is another interesting point. Most people can call to mind the face of a friend or family member. They can see it quite clearly. An aphantasic person knows what their loved ones look like. They recognize them instantly in real life, but they can't bring up a mental image of their face. This doesn't mean they have prosopagnosia, which is face blindness. People with prosopagnosia struggle to recognize faces even when seeing them in person. Aphantasics don't have that problem. They just can't conjure the image when the person isn't there. It's an internal, not an external, visual processing difference. Then there's imagination and creativity. This is where a big misconception comes in. People often assume that if you can't visualize, you can't be creative or imagine things. This is absolutely not true. Aphantasics are just as creative as anyone else. They just do it differently. Creativity isn't just about pictures, it's about ideas, concepts, connections, emotions. Aphantasics can be writers, musicians, designers, architects, artists. They can be incredibly imaginative. A writer with aphantasia will conceptualize their characters and settings. They will understand the emotional arc, the plot points, the personality of their characters. They just won't be seeing the scene unfold in their head as they write. They might be working with words, feelings, and abstract concepts. An architect might think about structure, space, and flow in purely conceptual or diagrammatic terms, without a finished visual in their mind until they build a physical model or draw it. So, yes, aphantasics can imagine. They just imagine in different ways. They think conceptually. They work with facts and ideas. They are problem solvers. Their thinking isn't reliant on mental images, and that can sometimes be an advantage for abstract thought. What about dreams? This is a common question. If you can't visualize when you're awake, do you dream visually? And for most people with aphantasia, the answer is yes. They do dream visually. Their dreams often have images, colors, sounds, just like anyone else's dreams. This is a key piece of information. It suggests that the brain can generate visual information. It's just that the conscious, voluntary access to that function is different or absent when they are awake. The dreaming brain seems to bypass whatever mechanism prevents conscious visualization. Reading a book is another interesting example. When someone without aphantasia reads a novel, they often see the story play out in their head. The characters, the settings, the actions, it's like watching a movie. For an aphantasic person, reading is different. They understand the plot perfectly. They connect with the characters emotionally. They absorb all the details about the setting, but they don't have a mental movie playing. They just know what's happening, they understand the description of the character's appearance, but they don't visualize their face. They understand the description of a grand castle, but they don't see it. It's a more abstract, conceptual engagement with the text. They enjoy stories just as much, but their internal experience is different. And what about everyday mental tasks? Trying to remember where you put your keys, planning your route to a new place. For some, these tasks involve a quick mental visual scan or a map. For an aphantasic, it's more about logical deduction, remembering sequences, or conceptual spatial awareness. They might use verbal strategies or abstract spatial reasoning. They know that keys are usually on the hook by the door, not I see the keys on the hook by the door. There can be an emotional impact when someone discovers they have aphantasia. For some, there's a sense of loss. They feel like they've been missing out on a whole dimension of human experience. They hear others talk about replaying fond memories with vivid mental images, and they realize they can't do that. That can be a bit sad. Others feel relief. Finally, there's a name for something they've always felt was different about them. They understand why certain visualization exercises never worked for them, or why they couldn't relate when people talked about seeing things in their head. It validates their experience. The science behind aphantasia is still developing. The researchers are trying to understand what's happening in the brain. We know that visualization involves several brain regions. These include areas in the frontal lobe for planning and control, the parietal lobe for spatial awareness, the temporal lobe for memory, and especially the visual cortex at the back of the brain where visual information is processed. One hypothesis is that in aphantasia, there might be a disconnect. The brain areas that conceptualize an image, like knowing what an apple is, might not be effectively communicating with the brain areas that produce the conscious visual experience. It's like the instruction to show me an apple gets sent, but the visual processing part of the brain doesn't send a signal back, or the signal doesn't reach the conscious awareness. Another idea is that it's a problem with the readout mechanism. The brain might be generating visual information at a subconscious level, but it's not being translated into a conscious, subjective experience. It's not about being blind. The eyes and the basic visual processing system work perfectly fine. The aphantasia is all about what happens inside the brain, independent of external visual input. Right? It's a difference in how the brain generates and experiences internal representations. There are also variations of aphantasia. Some people have what's called two-tail aphantasia. This means they can't imagine anything in any sensory modality. No visual, no sound, no smell, no touch, no taste. It's a complete lack of sensory imagination. Others have partial aphantasia, where maybe only the visual aspect is affected. They might still be able to imagine sounds or feelings, and as mentioned before, there are specific terms for other sensory imaginations. Anauralia is the inability to imagine sounds. Anosmia is the inability to imagine smells. These often go hand in hand with visual aphantasia, but not always. The human brain is incredibly complex, and these variations show just how diverse our internal experiences can be. People often wonder if there's a cure for aphantasia. The short answer is no, not really. And most researchers and people with aphantasia don't see it as a disease or a deficit that needs curing. It's more accurately described as a neurological variation. It's just a different way a brain can be wired. Trying to force visualization might be like trying to force a left-handed person to be right-handed. While some individuals try different techniques, like mindfulness or specific imagery exercises, success varies greatly. For most, it's simply how their brain works, and they adapt to it. The focus is more on understanding and acceptance, rather than trying to fix something that isn't broken, just different. In fact, there can be some unexpected benefits and strength that come with aphantasia. People with aphantasia are often very good at abstract thinking. They might excel in fields that rely on logic, critical analysis, and conceptual understanding. They are often less distracted by irrelevant visual details. They tend to focus on the core facts and relationships. Another potential benefit is related to trauma. For many people, traumatic memories come with vivid, intrusive visual flashbacks. These can be incredibly distressing. For someone with aphantasia, while they will still remember the traumatic event and experience its emotional impact, they are less likely to be haunted by those vivid, replaying mental images. This doesn't mean they don't experience trauma, but the way their brain processes and recalls it might mitigate some of the most visceral visual aspects. Some people with aphantasia report living more in the present moment. Since they aren't constantly replaying visual memories of the past or picturing detailed scenarios for the future, their minds might be less inclined to wander visually. They often describe a focus on objectivity and facts, rather than subjective, image-based recall. There are still a lot of misconceptions about aphantasia. One big one is that if you can't visualize, you can't be creative or imagine anything. We've already covered why this isn't true. Imagination is much broader than just seeing pictures. Another misconception is that aphantasics can't remember anything. Again, false. Their memory works differently, focusing on facts, concepts, and semantic information rather than episodic visual replays. They remember who they are, their life story, and how to navigate the world. Their memory system is just organized in a different way. And a huge misconception is that people with aphantasia somehow lack emotions or empathy. This is completely untrue. They experience the full range of human emotions. They connect with people, they love, they grieve, they rejoice. Their internal emotional landscape is as rich and complex as anyone else's. The way their brain processes information is just different, not diminished. We live in a very visual world. Our language is full of visual metaphors. I see what you mean. Picture this, a clear vision. For someone with aphantasia, navigating these common phrases can be a subtle, constant reminder of their different internal experience. They understand the metaphor, of course, but the literal meaning is foreign to them. Explaining aphantasia to others can be a challenge. When someone says, just picture it, and you say, I can't, they often struggle to understand. Their default assumption is that everyone's brain works like theirs. It's hard for them to grasp a complete absence of something they take for granted. Many people respond with disbelief or try to offer unhelpful advice like, just try harder. This is why awareness is so important. The more people understand aphantasia, the easier it becomes for those who experience it to explain their reality and to feel understood. Aphantasia is a truly fascinating aspect of human cognition. It highlights the incredible diversity of our brains and how we experience the world. It reminds us that our internal realities, while often assumed to be universal, can vary widely from person to person. It challenges us to look beyond our own subjective experience and consider how others might perceive, process, and interact with the world around them. It's not about a lack or a deficiency, it's about a different operating system, a unique way of processing and engaging with information. People with aphantasia navigate life effectively, often excelling in their chosen fields, forming deep relationships, and contributing meaningfully to society. Their experience simply broadens our understanding of what it means to be human and how wonderfully varied our inner worlds can be. Understanding aphantasia fosters empathy and acceptance, helping us appreciate the full spectrum of human consciousness.